Alright, this is the first video on finding derivatives of sine and cosine functions. First big idea is that when you take the derivative with respect to x of sine x, the derivative is cosine x. When you take the derivative with respect to x of cosine x, the derivative is negative sine x. So to get started, we're going to find the derivative of each of the following. So I'm going to find the derivative of 2 sine x. I'm going to find the derivative with respect to x of 2 sine x. Well, based on what we just said up here, the derivative of sine x is cosine x, and then that's being multiplied by a constant, so our answer is 2 cosine x. All right. For letter B, I'm going to take the derivative with respect to x. Of sine x all over 2. Now just to make this a little bit easier, so that I actually have a coefficient of sine x, I'm just going to change this to the derivative with respect to x of 1/2 sine x, because dividing by 2 and multiplying by 1/2 are the same thing. So now let's go ahead and now I can take the derivative of sine x, which is cosine x. So my answer is 1/2 cosine x. All right, last one. I have y equals x plus cosine x. So we're going to have to apply other differentiation rules here, using the power rule that you learned in the last lesson. So if I take the derivative with respect to x of x plus cosine x, well, I know that the derivative of x is just 1, and now the derivative of cosine x from up here is negative sine x, so I'm just going to have minus sine x. Here's our answer. Alright, right now what I'd like you to do is go ahead and pause the video. Here are 3 questions for you to try. Zoom out a little bit. You can pause it right here, and then once you're done, you can check your answers with mine. So I'm going to keep going though. So if I take the derivative with respect to x, 6x to the 4th minus 2x minus cosine x. Alright, well, let's apply the power rule right here. I'm going to bring the 4 to the front and multiply. I'm going to multiply the 4 by 6 and have 24. Subtract the exponent by 1, x to the 3rd. The derivative of negative 2x is just negative 2, because the derivative of x is 1. Now the derivative of cosine x is negative sine x, but I have this other negative that I have here. So this will become plus sine of x. Alright, next. Let's take the derivative with respect to x. Sine x all over 5 minus 3x plus 2. Alright. Well, kind of like we said before, this is the same thing as 1/5 sine x. When I take the derivative of sine x, I get cosine x. So I'm going to have 1/5 cosine of x. Now when I take the derivative of negative 3x, that's just negative 3. And the derivative of this constant 2 is just 0. Here's the answer to letter B. Alright, for letter C, I'm going to take the derivative with respect to x. Negative 5 cosine x plus 2 sine x plus 6 over x to the 4th. Alright, now when I take the derivative of negative 5 cosine x, the derivative of cosine x is negative sine x. So negative sine x times a negative 5 becomes positive 5 sine x. The derivative of sine x is cosine x. So I'm going to have plus 2 cosine x. And then now for the derivative here, I'm going to compute this on the side. So first thing is I'm taking the derivative with respect to x of 6 over x to the 4th. But with this x to the 4th, in order to apply the power rule, I need to bring it up to the numerator and rewrite it as 6x to the negative 4th. Now when I apply the power rule, I multiply the negative 4 by 6 and get negative 24. Subtract 1, x to the negative 5th. Bring it down and I have negative 24 over x to the 5th. So right here, let's add that on, minus 24 x to the 5th. Alright. Now, if you have any questions on these so far, you can go ahead and message me on Remind. So let's go down here. Here's another special derivative we have to talk about, the derivative of the natural exponential function. This is a very easy one to remember because the derivative of e to the x is just e to the x. It stays exactly the same. So now let's take a look at A. If I want to find the derivative with respect to x of 5e to the x, well, the derivative of e to the x is just e to the x, and I multiply it by 5, I get 5e to the x. Next, let's take a look here. I'm going to take the derivative with respect to x. E to the x minus 4x. When I take the derivative of e to the x, that just stays e to the x. The derivative of negative 4x is just negative 4. E to the x minus 4. Alright. Last one. Let's take the derivative with respect to x of 7e to the x minus cosine of x. Alright. So now, if I take the derivative of 7e to the x, it just stays 7e to the x. The derivative of cosine is negative sine, but minus negative sine becomes plus sine x. It's a plus right here. Alright, 7e to the x plus sine x. Alright, here are 3 for you to try before we move on. So go ahead and try these right now. Try these, and then I'll go over them in a second. If you want to pause the video right here, just pause. Alright, so I'm taking the derivative with respect to x of negative 7e to the x. Well, the derivative of e to the x is just e to the x, and I'm multiplied by negative 7, so negative 7e to the x. Next, I have 3 sine x plus 5x to the 4th plus e to the x minus 2. Let's take the derivative with respect to x. Alright, so the derivative of 3 sine x, well, the derivative of sine x is cosine x, so I'm going to have 3 cosine x. Apply the power rule here, multiply the 4 by 5, plus 20x cubed. The derivative of e to the x is just e to the x. and the derivative of -2 is 0, so I'm not going to write it. All right. Let's see, or the derivative, yeah. All right, now let's keep going. All right, let's take the derivative with respect to x. Let's make that 4e to the x minus 3 cosine x plus 2. All right, the derivative of 4e to the x is just 4e to the x. All right, the derivative of -3 cosine x. Well, the derivative of cosine x becomes negative sine. But then I have another negative here, so I'm having plus 3 sine x. And the derivative of this 2 is just 0. So here is my answer. All right. This concludes video number 1 on finding derivatives of sine and cosine functions and natural exponential functions.